Welcome to the Healdsburg Museum's History Talks channel. This is a series of talks by museum docents originally presented at the city's Plaza gazebo before a live audience. Now you can hear them in the comfort of your own home. If you enjoy these talks, don't forget to subscribe to the History Talks channels. If you have any questions, post them in the comments and our docents will try to answer them. We hope you enjoy the following presentation. The name of this talk is Festivals, from Mayday Nights to Water Carnival Queens. My name is Frances Schierenbeck, and I am an architectural historian. So festivals is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it really was a fascinating subject. And one of the things I found interesting is the number of festivals that have been held in Healdsburg throughout the years. I literally could not figure out how many have been held. They just were so prevalent, particularly during the Victorian era. But why was that? During the Victorian era, there was a lot of social constraints on how you could socialize, particularly for women. We could socialize in church groups and maybe our civics groups, or you could invite me over for lunch or for tea, but I couldn't just say to you, hey, you want to go down to the bar and have a beer? That was not acceptable. So festivals gave us a way to associate in groups, and a lot of these festivals were actually put on by women in a time when women weren't giving a lot of opportunities. Festivals were also good for couples that were courting because you had to be very careful about your reputation in that era. But if you were out in a group of people, everybody could see what you were doing. So let's take a look at some of the festivals that were held in Healdsburg. The first festival held in Healdsburg was the Mayday Festival, and the Knightshood Festival or tournament was held at the same time from 1857 to 1860. During that time period, the Victorians had this idea that the medieval period was very romantic. So they would have these big tournaments where the gentlemen would dress up as knights and have these games, and the ladies would dress in costume. We now know that that time period was violent and there was a lot of disease. Now, Matheson, who was from Scotland, when he was 16 years old, there was one of these huge tournaments held by where he lived. Now, we don't know for sure that he went. We don't know that he was the one that started this tournament here in Healdsburg, but it's very likely he was involved. The tournament included games, and I'll talk about one of them in a bit. And it also had a picnic and a barbecue. And of course, you had a queen and her court. And the very first queen in Healdsburg was Miss Mary Jane McGrew, who was the eldest daughter of a local blacksmith. The knighthood tournaments and festivals in general disappeared from Healdsburg for about 17 years. And why was that? Well, in 1861, the American Civil War started, and in 1862, Roderick Matheson was killed in battle. So it's probably thought of as bad taste to have a festival while your country's at war and where a very prominent local gentleman was killed as a war hero. So 17 years later is basically a generation. So at this time, they're probably thinking it's a way to honor people. It's no longer considered bad taste. So the tournament comes back. And here we have an advertisement for it. It talks about the Grand Knighthood Tournament and all the mounted knights and all the towns that are participating and $50 in prizes. And of course, we have our May Queen and our maids that are going to be crowned. So this was a big event. How many people attended is a little bit suspect, anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 people. So maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. But we do know that it was a huge event. They would have all kinds of activities. Of course, you would have your queen and dances, and you would have a maypole dance, and they would have parades and a picnic and volunteer guards to escort the queen. So this was a huge event. People would come from all over everywhere. And it was a great way to advertise what the town was, to bring people in, lots of money. It was really good for the economy. This is one of the earliest pictures we have from the Knights tournament. This is around 1870s, and look at the costumes. They're so detailed. Now, the gentleman right in front with the ermine cape and the crown is L.A. Norton, and he was a prominent lawyer in town, and he actually went to San Francisco to get all these costumes, and they must have cost a pretty penny because the detail is pretty exquisite on these. This is a picture of the knights lined up here, all on their horses, again, looking very regal. And I tried to determine if these were some of the same costumes from the 1870s, but I really couldn't get that good a look at the pictures. The quality isn't that good. But if you notice behind them, there's something going on. What we have is the coronation of one of the festival queens. This is here on the Healdsburg Plaza. One of the events that would be held at these tournaments was tilting. Now, a gentleman would ride a horse down the road, and he would have a long pole called a lance, and he would spear these rings that were hanging off these other poles, and whoever ended up with the most rings would be the king for the festival. This is another pictures of the Healdsburg Lancers, or our knights, gathered before what was the old city hall on Matheson and Center Street. The Knighthood tournament would eventually become part of our Independence Day celebration. And if you notice the number of dates and years that the festival had occurred, you can see that there was a lot of stuff going on. That's why it's kind of hard to track these festivals, because the names would change when they were held, would change, and then the names would change back, and then the dates would change back. So it can be very confusing. But this is an article that appeared in the newspaper in 1903, just talking about what a wonderful festival we had. The Knighthood tournament was very popular in Healdsburg, so what if we brought it back? I don't think it would work, but sometimes it's just fun to imagine. By 1888, the Floral Festival, or Mayday Carnival, would become a little more popular than the Knighthood tournament, although it was still occurring. And here we have a picture of our 1895 queen, Emma Mueller. Almost everybody in town got involved in the spirit because, again, this was a great way to show off the town and make some money. Now, here we have West Street, which is currently Healdsburg Avenue, and look at the buildings. They're all decked out with bunting. You see lanterns hanging. There actually was a newspaper article that was talking about the electric lights hung in the plaza because electricity was so new that having these lights was a big deal. And there was actually special trains that would come to Healdsburg, particularly for these festivals. So we're talking about a lot of people coming into town. So you want to show your town off to its best. This is a picture of the parade. This is just a shot of one of the floats and a band coming up behind them. It's more likely be the Sodiomi band, but I don't know that for sure. This is Queen Emma Mueller in 1895. You can see she's in her carriage with her court, getting ready to ride in the parade. And notice all the people in the balcony watching the parade go by. And here's the coronation on the plaza of Miss Emma. And you can see her back by that large tower. This is Queen Alice Haig Dixon in 1896, and this is a quote from the paper that says, "The 10,000 or more people who came to Healdsburg to feast their eyes upon the grand floral festival and vote this the most successful public celebration that ever occurred in the annals of Sonoma County." Well, we don't know if this is a little bit of boasting, but we do know that was a big event. It was such a big event that newspapers around the Bay Area would actually keep tally of how many votes each queen candidate would get. And then they would have a big announcement when whoever was elected queen was chosen. And apparently hundreds of people would wait around the plaza to see who the queen was going to be. But interestingly enough, the newspapers were very kind to the other ladies. If you didn't win, they would say something like, well, Miss so-and-so didn't win because she had to go back to teach school, or Miss so-and-so had to go take care of her mother, so she wasn't around to look for votes or for people to see that she was a candidate. I mentioned that in later years, the Floral Festival merged with the Independence Day celebration. And the reason it did that is the Santa Rosa Rose Parade was being held on May Day. And so they started to conflict with each other. So they moved the Floral Festival and the Knighthood Tournament to Independence Day. Now, this is Nina Luce, Goddess of Liberty, 1899. It's a little bit out of those dates, but it's such an interesting picture that I decided to use it anyways. This is our Floral Festival queen, also called our Goddess of Liberty, Mabel Sewell in her court in 1903. Again, look at the lovely fashions. You can see how they've started to really change from the earlier pictures. Here is Mabel and her court on July 4th, 1903. Getting ready to ride on her float through the parade. And this is Isabel Simi. She was the last Floral Festival queen, and this is 1904. And this picture is just so regal and lovely. You would not know, if you didn't know who Isabel was, you wouldn't know that this wasn't some actual princess or queen having her picture taken. This is a postcard that was sent out advertising the Floral Festival, and the quote says, "Come and be one of us and revel among the flower-decked hills and fertile valleys." Again, we're trying to sell Healdsburg and the area about how beautiful it is. But look at the dates. It says May 26th through May 28th, and I thought the Floral Festival was moved to the 4th of July. Well, it was, but apparently it was moved back. Again, this is why it becomes difficult to track when these festivals are occurring. This is just a picture of Isabel waiting in front of her house on Front Street. The house is still there. It was most recently the River Bell Inn. This is just two lovely ladies in a carriage getting ready to ride in the parade. Again, look at the amount of effort that went into decorating this. This is the last Floral Festival parade because after this, the festival would move over to the river and become known as the Water Carnival. An unfortunate footnote in Isabel's reign was an article that appeared in the Windsor Herald by editor Andy Nolan, who accused Healdsburg of being a bunch of anarchists for electing a swarthy Dago as a queen, excuse me for the slurs, and Charles Crawford, who was their king, was a Dago or a Turk. People in Healdsburg did not take kindly to this. They made this effigy of him and they took it out and burnt it. And here we have a picture of the replica that was made for an exhibit for the museum. The Water Carnival was extremely difficult to try to track the dates. As you've noticed, I have so many of them up here. I wasn't even sure when it was being held, and it was held as recently as about 2017. The Water Carnival would actually have two parades. They would have one through downtown, and then they would have one on the river. Now, this is a picture of the San Francisco Veterans Fire Department float with Lily Coit on it. And if you're familiar with Coit Tower in San Francisco or Lily Coit herself, she was a philanthropist who supported the San Francisco Fire Department. Track and field events were popular during these festivals, and this was a high jump event that was held during the Water Carnival in 1909. And this is Ed Beeson. And if you're familiar with Ed Beeson, he was a local Healdsburger, and he was a world-class high jumper. He actually held the world's record for high jump for over 10 years. And unfortunately for Ed, he didn't get to go to the Olympics because the 1916 Olympic Games were canceled due to World War I. Of course, you must have your queen, and this is the Water Carnival Queen, Miss Stella Lufkin from 1909. Look at the lovely costumes and check out the faces on some of these kids. They look like they would much rather be someplace else. This is the royal barge of Queen Stella coming down the river, and the bridge behind is not the memorial bridge that we know today. That is an older bridge built in 1893, but there's still a lot of people up there watching the parade go by. This is a close-up of Miss Stella and her court on the royal barge, and I want you to think about what these women are wearing. Now, they've got these very elaborate hats, and of course they have their blouses, and underneath their blouses they would have a corset cover with a corset and a camisole. Then they would have their skirt with numerous petticoats, their bloomers, their stockings, and their shoes. This weighs anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds. Now, if you go into the water with this on, it's going to be very difficult to get out. So you better hope that there's a gentleman there to help you get out of the river. Unfortunately, drowning for Victorian women was not that uncommon, and it was such a problem in certain locations that they actually had campaigns to teach women how to swim, because women didn't swim because it wasn't thought to be ladylike. And again, with the weight of these costumes, you really needed to know how to get yourself out of the water. This is just a picture of a lovely float from probably what is the city of Santa Rosa. And just look at the young ladies and their costumes with the big bows in their hair. Just lovely. This is a float of Black Bart stealing a canoe. If you are familiar with Black Bart, you know he was a bandit that held up a stage near Cloverdale, made his way to Healdsburg, saw two gentlemen and a lady going down the river in their canoe. He commandeered it. He made the woman give him her coat, and then he had the gentleman row him down river where he got out and then escaped on a train. Now, the newspaper article at the time said that this was such a good depiction of what happened that it should have won an award. This is the Good Luck Swastika float, and it's a bit of a shock to see because we associate the swastika was something of ultimate evil and the Nazis, but originally, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, it was a symbol of peace and prosperity and good fortune. So if you see it in an older photograph, it could very well have meant that and not the symbol of ultimate evil. The photograph in the left corner is actually a picture of a tile that used to be on the plaza. I don't believe it's there anymore. Again, they were using it to mean something completely different. Occasionally you will see this symbol in older buildings throughout the United States, and that's generally, hopefully, what it meant. It was meaning something completely different. This is a swan float that was created by Ed Snook in the early 1900s, and it was later recreated in the 2000s when the Water Carnival was brought back. And I saw the recreated one, and it was pretty spectacular to watch it going down the river. So I'm sure that the early 1900s ones was just as fun to see. And this image has actually been used a lot in different Healdsburg advertisements, so you may have already seen it. The Water Carnival actually went till about 1930, and then it shifts over, and we now have the Harvest Festival. The Harvest Festival was held during harvest, and that was part of the problem, was that anybody who was interested in the harvest was busy doing the harvest. And then we run up against World War II. So that really is kind of the end of the Victorian era talks here with the Water Carnival. And I hope you enjoyed this talk. It was a fun thing to do. So many pictures, lots more pictures available on the Healdsburg Museum website if you're interested. And of course, we have lots more interesting presentations available on our History Talks channel. If you enjoyed the talk, please subscribe to our channel and check out our other presentations.